Welcome to Break for Art. My name is Adaro Kaufman-Okoko, and I'm the McDermott Intern for Adult Programs at the Dallas Museum of Art. Today we're going to spend some time looking at a painting called the Laundress Blue Room, which was created in 1900 by the Swiss artist Félix Vallotton. It's painted with tempera on cardboard mounted on canvas, and its dimensions are 19 3/4 inches high by 31 1/4 inch wide. We'll begin by taking some time to simply look at the painting. Feel free to click this video into full screen to focus fully on its details. What part of the painting was your attention drawn to first? What is it about that section that grabbed your attention? As you continue to look, notice how long you spend looking at different parts of the painting. Where are you spending the most time? And what is it that you're seeing? Please feel free to pause this video as you continue carefully looking. When you've had enough time alone with this work, hit play and we'll explore some key points of interest together. So this is a painting of 4 figures gathered in a bedroom. The bedroom itself looks like a classic setup, with the bed on the far right covered by a cozy polka-dotted blanket and a nightstand right next to it, with some objects that we can't see very clearly set on top. The room is also pretty spacious, and there's enough space for a big window, several chairs, and large pieces of fabric to drape all over the expansive floor. Of the 4 figures we see, there are 2 older women. One is closer to us in the foreground, and the other is by the window at the back. Both are seated on chairs, and they're hunched over their work, sewing fabric that drapes over their laps. Of the 2 women, the one by the window is working on a much smaller piece of fabric, and we can see how she uses the chair in front of her to assist with holding it up off the floor. On the chair next to her, there are several objects that are stacked on top of each other, and these might be additional materials for her to use as she continues working. We can imagine that the woman closest to us might also have additional materials set up somewhere next to her, even though we can't see them from our perspective. Looking to the much larger piece of fabric that the woman in the foreground is working on, instead of holding it up on an adjacent chair, she lets it pool to the floor in front of her. And if we follow the flow of the fabric to the middle of the painting, we see 2 young children seated together on top of it. From their crouched positions and heads bent down between them, we can imagine that they're playing some kind of a game or fun activity together. The only source of light that we can see in the scene is coming from the window. The tall curtains are drawn, pinned up on either side with strips of fabric, and shorter translucent curtains hang across a large portion of the window, blocking out the outside and letting in ambient sunlight. Focusing now on the path of light that's emanating from the window, we can see how it radiates out to each corner of the painting in a way that roughly breaks it up into 3 sections: left, center, and right. The left and right sections are shrouded in dark shadows, and they don't contain many elements, mostly just the walls, the bed, and a few other scattered objects. The central section is instead the brightest, with the most elements, including the figures, the window, the chairs, and the pieces of fabric. But first, imagine yourself in this scene. What do you think you would be doing? What do you hear? And what is the temperature of the room? The dark shadows and the few objects that make up these sections contribute to a quieter and less energetic atmosphere. And adding to this effect is the color palette. As we see in this breakdown of the colors, they're mainly just different hues of blue. In color theory, blue is classified as a cool color, and cool colors are typically more peaceful. They draw less attention to themselves, as opposed to warm colors like red and orange, which attract attention and are typically more stimulating. So this cooler palette adds to the peaceful and quiet effect, and it also ensures that these sections recede even more into the background space of the painting. When we view the painting as a whole, the divide between the central and side sections is even more striking. The higher level of brightness and busyness of the central section makes it feel more animated and livelier. This is also emphasized by the higher level of activity within the section. The children are playing, the women are working, and we can even visualize how the pieces of fabric and the different chairs will move and shift as the time passes. Even looking closer at the small portion of the window that's left uncovered, we can see scaffolding on a building just outside, suggesting active construction. This breadcrumb also lets us imagine the world beyond the room, where new large structures are being built in close proximity to others. And again, the color palette complements the section's atmosphere. As you can see, it's a warmer palette made up of mainly orangey hues. As previously mentioned, warm colors are more stimulating and active, and just like the other components within the section. And they also attract attention. And in fact, you were most likely drawn to a point within this section when you took your first look at the painting. So imagine yourself in this scene. What do you think you would hear? While this section does contain more activity and is more visually stimulating, there's still an overall sense of privacy and intimacy that's preserved when you look at the painting as a whole. Most importantly to note is that there's a separation from the outside world. The only window we can see in the room is closed and mostly covered by the curtains. Dark walls surround the rest of the space, further containing and insulating us. Even looking at the figures, they're all focused downwards, mostly turned away from the outside. All these components cast the outside world into the background, and they remind us of the privacy of this captured moment, one where the figures are relaxing in each other's company within their own space. As you've been carefully looking at this artwork, something else you may have noticed is that you can actually see the artist's brushstrokes. And this has a lot to do with the type of paint that was used. Valiton chose to use tempera, which is a very fluid medium, almost like water, that dries within seconds. This means if you try to lay down a glob of tempera all at once, it will dry and then promptly crack off. So it must be applied very lightly in single brush strokes. And because tempera is also very transparent, darker shades of color have to be achieved by layering brush strokes, where each added layer darkens the color by a shade. And this all means that it's more difficult to blend colors and shadows. So let's look more closely at the painting to see how Valiton dealt with this medium. We can see how varied his brushstrokes are in their direction and shape within this large piece of fabric. He's using closely spaced directional lines or a hatching technique to communicate the way that the fabric falls to the floor, folding in on itself, and how the light interacts with these complex shapes. Looking now to the expanse of dark walls that surround the scene, we can see how they're instead made up of vertical brushstrokes, which indicate to us the straightness of the walls. And these darker shades of color are most likely built up from several layers of these vertical brushstrokes. We can start to visualize the amount of time and the level of repetition that it must have taken Valiton to fill up this entire space. We can even imagine how this painting process could have been meditative, and its repetition and required concentration and patience. The brushstrokes give us a glimpse into the repetitive and time-consuming painting process, and they act as a representation of the artist's own experience painting. We can begin to wonder about how Valiton must have felt as he painted this artwork. So how does this painting make you feel now that we've explored its details? Are there other factors that you think contribute to its overall effect? I hope you enjoyed slowing down and taking a closer look with me at the Laundress Blue Room, and I look forward to seeing you soon at the Dallas Museum of Art.